Hi there, welcome. I wanted to share with you some important tips today in regards to how to help someone who's over apologetic. And you might wonder, why is it such a big deal and why it's needed? Well, I'll be explaining the importance behind it and as well how it comes about in the first place. How does someone become over apologetic? Why is it a problem? But furthermore, I do want to issue a quick disclaimer right now. The process of today and what can be applied in the future towards someone you may or may not know of. It's not about conditioning someone's mind to change in a forceful way, nor is it about making them think that anything that they do in the future isn't their fault, because that can go from one extreme to another. It's about putting it into perspective and getting that balance on the stick just in between, so there is a better understanding, but more importantly, so it's done naturally. So first of all, what is over apologizing? An over apologetic person. It's where someone may feel that whatever they do, say, actions, even if it's out of their own control, that they're responsible for it, and more so in a negative way, such as if there is a negative outcome, that they feel that they have to apologize even when realistically they've done nothing wrong. It could be vocally, verbally, it could be action based, it could be a simple accident or a level of clumsiness, or once again completely out of their control where it's somebody else, but somehow you feel it applies to you for that end outcome which was negative. Now, there are two types of over apologetic people, one of which may need this type of video more than the other. A naturally over apologetic person could be just the way they are and how they've grown up, their manners, their level of sensitivity within, where naturally they're just more conscious of their surrounding themselves and people around when acting and interacting with one another. Which isn't exactly a bad thing. It shows that they're a good person and that they care enough to not want to cause any trouble or harm towards anyone, an event, a situation of that extent. But when it borders onto it being unnatural is, for example, where it's a bit excessive, even at times when it's clearly not the person's fault, but they still genuinely feel that they're to blame, and it can even lead to further negative feelings within, where it might put them down and they might not be in the best of moods. And more so, how it comes about, that type of situation is through the environment one is in. Could be a household, could be if you're at school, could be if you're with someone, or like relationship, or if you're friends in a group. And it's a process. As of like today, the process is countering it, reverse engineering, but the original process for an individual becoming over apologetic in an unnatural way with the presence of others or just one about who's a negative influence themselves, where anything that goes wrong in life for them, they may pin the blame or responsibilities onto the other person, the victim. And at first, it might not be that apparent, and the victim could respond and deny, reject, or show a level of resistance and resilience. But if it's wearing and it's long term, you've got the frequency, the depth, the repetition, it can wear someone down. It is almost like a form of brainwashing, indoctrination, even possibly gaslighting. So eventually, through all that resistance, you're breaking down that barrier. That's what a dark force is doing, to the point where the victim will just end up submitting, maybe becoming submissive, depending how they are naturally to begin with. Some people may have a higher tolerance level, resistance levels, and others may be a bit more vulnerable. But the actions of wearing someone down long term, changing their mindset, rewiring their system within to the point where they become almost obedient with accepting that they're the problem, they're to blame for everything and anything that occurs in life towards or outwards in regards to them or the other person that's present. A silly example, but it could happen, is you could have an individual walking on in with a cup of a warm drink. The victim could be sat down, and then as the person walks in with the drink, they could trip over, fall over near to the leg of the victim, but no contact was made. But maybe the victim was talking or said, "Oh, hi there," and then the other person supposedly got distracted and by their own doing and clumsiness, they fell over, spilt hot water, whatever, on the ground or on themselves, and they're hurt, they may be injured, or maybe frustrated. They lash out and take it out on the victim who sat down and said, "You're to blame. You made me fall over. You made me do this," even though it's just down to the own clumsiness of the person walking on in. No actual contact was made, no tripping, no hazardous things like that. But at first, an event like that, the other person could say, "I'm not to blame, wasn't me." But longer term, so that's more abstract and there's literal physical distance between the obstructions and stuff, the person will just accept and think, "Yeah, I'm to blame for that." Another situation could be you trying to take a photo of something, and just because a person nearby, the victim, sneezes or coughs ever so slightly, and then it causes the other, when taking a photo, to take a bad quality one or a blurry picture. There's no direct correlation, but that person that sneezed or coughed may feel really sad or really apologetic and really feel bad within because they've ruined someone's special moment or when taking a photo, but there shouldn't be a direct correlation. And at first, there wouldn't be. But when you wear and break someone down, it might get to that point where they feel just by breathing, just by existing or talking, that they're to blame. It's almost like creating some kind of scapegoat every time when something goes wrong. And that could be done by a dark force because they don't want to admit responsibility themselves or accountability when something goes wrong, small or big scale. So they can direct that focus, aggression or frustration onto somebody else so they can feel better about themselves, but at the cost of that, the victim does not feel good. Well, that's the problem. So when you got a victim, and it shouldn't be referred to as a victim, but I'm just using certain wording so you know who is who instead of saying person A, person B, because it would get confusing. But eventually that victim could break free or move on somehow. Maybe a cycle could be broken, but the damage has already been done because it's long term. Something so minuscule, such as a very small scale example, ended up being upscaled to bigger consequences and bigger negative feelings out of it by that vulnerable person. And the key term, vulnerability, is where the problem lies next and onwards, because wherever they go, they will always think that it's their fault. Even if they can't control certain things and there's no correlation to them, they'll still think it applies to them being the issue. So that's in regards to what is over apologizing, how it can be caused naturally, which isn't as problematic as in one's manners and consciousness, but unnaturally when it's forced into you, where you become over apologetic because other people made you feel that you had to apologize for anything and everything that went wrong, even if it didn't link to you whatsoever. The breaking down process of it, the long-term effects, how it remains imprinted and branded within the mind, and then beyond in the future where you come across other people. Because other people out there doesn't matter in real life or digitally online, because you got a vulnerable person. How do other people take the responsibility of that, whether they're conscious or not? Because you could get other people in the future that think, "Oh, that person's very over apologetic, they're broken, they're somewhat vulnerable, we can pin all the blame onto them the next time when something goes wrong for us," and so on and so on. Being a scapegoat or receiving all the blame isn't a good feeling anyway. And within, it can be wearing too, so it can lead to other negative side effects and mood changes too. And that it has like a chain effect of issues. So once you become vulnerable, then other people in the future could take advantage of that as well. So it's about trying to break that cycle, but in such a natural way that if you used to come across someone yourself not being over apologetic, but you come across someone who is, how do you sort that situation out? In terms of the treatment, it would be typically long term. It's the same length of time possibly as in how the original indoctrination begun in the first place with whatever dark force in the past. A long-term reversing effect, but in such a natural way and subtly done so the other person won't pick up on it. I did do a previous video in the past when it came to how to help someone that may hate themselves. They were once somewhat normal and they were brainwashed into thinking that they're not, and there's issues along the way and it wears them down, brainwashing and all of that. it's long-term and long-term damaging. So to reverse it, you've got to do the same process, but in a subtle way, so they don't pick up on it and they don't resist. But along the way, there might be levels of resistance. Even with this situation here, you could be walking about and you may accidentally graze past their arm or shoulder, and then they are really over apologetic and not literally but almost on their knees, and they may feel bad as well for obstructing, getting in the way, but they've done nothing wrong. It's just a simple bit of spatial awareness, or just just simple little collision. Nothing, it's not a big deal, but to them it is a big deal. And it's about reminding them that it's not the end of the world, because to them that's how it may feel. And as well as in the past, how they may have been made to feel as if it was the end of the world, and if there were consequences and punishments beyond that, whether it be verbally or physically. But importantly, it's who do you do this towards to, as in treatment? Is it just anyone, everyone? Well, to an extent, yes. This time round, it's a little bit more lenient and open, that you can direct it towards anyone, but effectively towards someone you know, because of that consistency, that depth of seeing them regularly in some form of communication and contact, close or a bit further. As long as there can be some kind of communication, vocalized, text-based, whatever, in acknowledging them and actions or events that go on, and just reminding them that they're not to blame for it, but without making it too direct. Maybe you can progress onwards in the future by reminding them or telling them that this isn't that bad, it isn't your fault, it's not direct to blame. And you could expand on that, but immediately, early on, probably best keeping it low key and small scale. As in, when something bad happens or something small scale, and they instantly apologize or even over apologize, instead of saying I'm sorry, they say I'm very, very sorry. Whether they get emotional or not, you just simply respond by saying, oh, it's okay. As if you don't care. To an extent, you shrug it off by simply saying, it's all right, not a big deal. By making it that way and made it known that it's not the end of the world, they may react differently and think, oh, so it's not that big of a deal, but it should be. But you just keep it, small scale. You just remind them, it's fine, it's not an issue, you've done nothing wrong, and that's it. As basic as that. And in terms of towards someone you know of, whether it be a family member, a friend, if you're with someone, you find someone, or anything else in between, when things go wrong and they apologise, at times when there's no reason for them to apologise, when they've done absolutely nothing wrong, that's when you remind them. Because as I said at the start of this video, the disclaimer is, it's not about changing someone's mind into over apologising to never apologising, because that can get very toxic and messed up itself. It's just about bringing it back into the middle, the focus point, the centre, balance. You kind of rewiring their outlook and perspective, but you're not forcibly doing it. You're not manipulating their mind. You're not telling them that they shouldn't be sorry. You're just suggesting or reacting as if it's not that big of a deal anyway. And through that repetitiveness over time, it might make them think, oh, maybe it isn't as bad as I think. Maybe it didn't cause as many problems, and maybe I might have not been the reason for that to occur. Obviously, longer term, when you might see a breakthrough, you could apply a bit more dialogue by saying or asking, what's your outlook on it, or why do you think you're responsible? So you got to almost not force, but get a response out of them, their introspection, thinking out as to why they think or feel that they could be responsible for a bad event, small scale, big scale, and then reiterate why it's not an issue or why they're not to blame, and then see how they respond there. But that could be longer term once you almost break down that little resistance barrier. Early on, it's just simply a reminder that it's fine. They don't have to be sorry. But if there comes a time where you're dealing with a over apologetic, resistant individual that insist it's their fault, that they are to blame, and they won't take no as an answer. So when you say, no, it's fine, don't worry, or don't apologize, and they say, no, I must apologize, don't push too much, don't reiterate too much either that they're okay, because it might get their back up against a wall, and then it might indirectly, in an alternative way, lead to them thinking that you're telling them not to be sorry. So it could mess up their mind even further by thinking, oh, so in the past, I was supposedly told that everything's my fault and I'm to blame for it, but now I'm suddenly being told I'm not to blame for this or that. What am I supposed to believe in life? From one extreme to another, it could discombobulate the mind of their own and cause them to spiral out of control, possibly. So obviously, when you're dealing with more of an insistent individual with a higher frequency and resistance level, you just say only so much and then back off. And then every now and then, just highlight. Of course, the most important point is when you reiterate it to them, and when you simply respond at first with shrugging it off, not making a big deal, not overreacting either. So then it changes their mindset, it discombobulates them for the right reasons to make them then think. It might stun them at times, just like a person who's seen it dark all the time and then suddenly they see a bit of light and it's alien-like to them. Certain exposure to that, but not too much for it to become overwhelming. That in addition, when it comes to them apologizing and how you respond back, it's like fencing, dueling, where they come off with the offense, not that they're offended, but the offense of responding back. But then instead of you being on the defense, you're on the offense too, to match and pair their energy by countering it with an alternative such as, it's fine, you don't need to worry, it's okay. Certain comforting words or lines to reiterate a level of stability, because that's one of the factors within it all. There's a lack of stability, there's a lack of certainty in regards to some things. In their reality, unnatural, forced reality, it's been instilled within their mind to think that there is a level of certainty and guarantee in life that anything that happens is on them and they're to blame, but that's obviously not the case. So when you're dueling with an individual, but not in a negative way, you're countering it by changing that level of certainty and undoing it slightly to create a bit of gap for possible thinking and response from them, depending on what type of person they are, and then see if they reflect on it or not. And obviously, if you see any signs or indications of that, then you can further the possible dialogue and further the responses, the depth behind it, and even question them, but not in an insulting or manipulative way, but just simply ask simple questions as to why they think that they could be responsible, or why they think they've done something bad, or why should they have to apologize. Over time, you pick the right timing for that, so that they then may question it, and they may even pick up on the possible irrational thoughts and the irrational behavior, but not about insulting them, that that's the way they are and that's a bad thing or it's shame on them. You just got to do it carefully so you can make them question the situation, but not question themselves too much. Because you don't want to go down that route. If you do and they start questioning themselves, they might, back away, isolate themselves, and think that they're now to blame for the original act of becoming over apologetic. So they end up not feeling sorry for themselves. They don't apologize to themselves, but they may apologize to others. But more importantly, which is a critical thing, they might start disliking themselves because of what they've become, what they've turned into, even though it wasn't their fault in the first place. They had no control of that. Just like when you come across people within this world somehow, you can't control who you come across, but can you control how you act and react to someone or an event? Well, what most people would say is, yes, absolutely, you've got control of that. But that is an ignorant way of thinking, because it all comes down to the factors of your mind in the first place, whether you're vulnerable or not. That can determine how you may react and how you feel at the time, because reality is, there's a lot of factors you may not be able to control. For example, coming across people and how they are themselves and how they will treat you. But then how you act from there on, how you respond to them, and whether you distance yourself or get closer, in terms of you having that control. You may not have that control depending on your mindset at the time and who you are as a person, if you're direct or not, confrontational or not, or if an individual or group overpower you before you can even do anything or say anything, depending on how strong they are, their presence, their force, and overall atmosphere and presence. So there's a lot of factors to take into consideration. So once again, just reiterating the importance that you don't want to respond or help too hard, too fast, or a direct approach, because it could trigger or end up leading to further side effects within the victim, backing away, backtracking, then having a dislike or hatred towards themselves, which leads to external and more internal extra negative side effects. And whilst they isolate themselves even further while still apologizing to other people outwards and becoming more vulnerable than ever, they're going to shut off more. You don't want to shut them off. You don't want to push them away too far, because then they might become out of reach physically, literally, mentally, and more. And that's pretty much it. As for when these events, when this stuff happens, the treatment of when you use it towards someone you may know. As for frequency, it's however often they over-apologize when there's no need to. And as for when, basically at the time of when they over-apologize, really. If there is such an event where they may do something wrong and they should apologize, it's not about telling them that they should apologize, nor is it about telling them that they shouldn't apologize. You just got to leave it be, because there might come a conflict of interest where you might care about someone or connected with someone in some way, whether that be by blood or whether it be by emotion. The conflict of interest could block the whole situation. So for the person that's trying to help someone else or some people, it can be challenging upon themselves as well. So you've got to reinstate a level of neutrality in situations like that, where a bad thing may happen or that they are responsible for something going wrong. It might not be major, it could be minor, but you've got to resist the urge in terms of feeling sorry or saying to them, oh no, you don't have to apologize, it's perfectly fine. You don't want to do too much of that, because if you did, on top of the other times where the over-apologizing person is apologizing when they don't need to, you're never really allowing them to take any accountability, which then would ultimately lead to them feeling that anything that they do isn't their fault. So it could get to the extreme of, if they feel like that, they could change their mindset, they could slap or punch, abuse someone, right? It could be domestic, and they feel they can get away with it because it's never their fault. And on a very, very small scale, not in regards to that exactly, but I've seen it myself, so I can apply it too. I've come across humans in the past, okay, more so digitally, and at times they may have apologized. They weren't an over-apologizing person, nor in an unnatural way, let me just make that clear. But at times where people may have been not punctual, or how they responded, or what they said, and I said, oh, it's okay, it's fine. There was almost like a little conflict of interest there, because I got on well with someone, or I might have been friends with someone, so I was a little bit more lenient, which probably wasn't a good thing. So by me constantly saying, it's okay, it's fine, they ended up doing it more often. Whatever it was, a level of disrespect, or just a slight little annoying factor, instead of them apologizing onwards, they stopped apologizing, because they realized subconsciously that whenever they do it, I would say, it's fine, it doesn't matter, don't worry. So they thought, okay, it's fine to do. It was almost like naturally conditioning or reiterating to them that whatever they're doing or saying, they can keep on doing it without any consequences. And then that's where you can go off the deep end and it gets bad. It has its own issues. They don't suffer, but other people around may. So to bring it back to reality, that when there is a conflict of interest, but you know that an individual who is a victim and who is vulnerable may be apologising at a time of when they need to, but you may feel sorry for them just in general for all the other times when they have apologised when they didn't need to. You just got to leave it be and allow that person to apologise. So there's still have a little level of boundaries of what's right, what's wrong, right? It was like an edge work process too. But then all the other times where there's no issue, but they feel it is an issue, you just remind them that it's not and it's okay. It's a level of instilling naturally with time a form of stability, a new focus, and a different type of certainty, but still retaining that accountability at times towards them. It's a slow, long process, but more effective if done somewhat frequently and over time in a natural way with natural wording and language, and more so if you're familiar with that person. Then, if by some chance it was with a stranger, and if that stranger came across many other strangers and the same points were reiterated, naturally that can have an even greater positive effect too. Because if you've got a stranger and a stranger who, they don't know one another, so a conscious, unnaturally over apologetic person may feel even worse, may feel even bad when it comes to a person that they don't know of, because of that uncertainty of, I wonder how they'll respond, I wonder what they will do, will there be any consequences or punishments towards me, as in like how it was in the past with someone that I knew or was around. You might be even more vulnerable towards them, and you could apologize and say, oh, I'm so sorry, can I do anything to help you? Can I do anything in response? Is there anything I can do? And if you had a stranger, wrong place, wrong time, another bad person, they could say, well, there is something you could do for me. And you know where that goes, it goes very dark. But if it comes across another situation with a different stranger who's actually somewhat normal and just simply responds back with, no, it's fine, don't worry, it's okay, and then you get on with your day, you pass on, then that original vulnerable person will think, oh wow, so I came across an unknown, mysterious, uncertain presence of someone in which it could have gone either way, and how they responded was, it was okay, it wasn't that big of a deal. But more of a deal to them that that level of uncertainty led to not many consequences. So that's like another factor as well. Whether that be towards a stranger or towards people familiar with one another, familiar faces we'll use as an example. But if anything did go wrong on such a small scale and it had no appliance to that over apologetic person, on top of how you respond by shrugging it off or not making a big deal about it and just reiterating that it's all okay, but there's no negative undertone either, no like direct or negative consequences, breaking that away, avoiding it. So when they feel that, oh, something bad is around the corner, going to come back to almost get them like karma, even though it's false karma, there won't be any negative follow-up. So then that will also discombobulate them too and make them possibly reevaluate, rethink things such as, wait, why is this person not punishing me? Why is this person not saying anything bad or accepting that I'm to blame? Normally, it should be a certain way, but it's not this time. So what's going on? And as more of that with time, it might make them rethink more. And the more they rethink and reevaluate, they may start seeing it in a different light. And yes, as I said, you can push on slightly with asking them or questioning them, but to a very small extent, just so they don't question themselves too much. And then it leads to blaming themselves because that has its own issues. What would you do though if it did lead to that, whether it be directly by you, or it just happened accidentally, or by some other means that they ended up then blaming themselves, or that naturally that they came to some kind of consciousness of where they feel that all this happened because it was on them? Well, then I guess you just got to go through the process of reminding them, if possible, if there is still a possibility of contact being made, when they don't shut themselves off completely, it's just by telling them that there's nothing you could do at the time. And it might link on to my previous video, which I could link down below in the comment section, which could tie on with this additional issue of if someone starts hating themselves, just a process of reminding them that, they're a positive person. You might mention some positive traits or characteristics about that individual, providing it's natural, even if it's short, even if it's simple, as long as it's meant naturally and genuinely, it'll have a greater impact. It's not about forcibly changing their mind, or it's not about forcibly telling them that they can't blame themselves. They should be allowed to, but at the same time, you should be allowed to remind them that you may not have to blame yourself. Is there an alternative way of looking at it? And that depth there, the depth of what you may think of that person and how you possibly see it as in them, or you put yourself in their shoes, bit of perspective there, and it could further help even more if you were once in that situation as well, if you put yourself back in time to their point as part of a timeline, you remind them that the factors are that you as an individual weren't always over apologetic. You may have apologized here and there when needed or when you felt there was a need to naturally, and that when you did come across a particular person, got close to them or a group, and there was an influence, a negative force, which you did not see or feel at the start, but it was slow, and because it's slower and may not be as intense, it can take over without you even realizing, in a covert, draining way, like a snake or a viper that could wrap itself around you, slowly suffocating the air out of you, not immediately, but slow enough where you don't pick up on it until it's too late, and by then your mind has already gone. You could remind them about that to an extent, reiterating that they can't control everything, nor can they control how they react or act at a time, because maybe they're overpowered, or maybe it's done covertly that they wouldn't have known anyway. Even if they went back in time, it couldn't have been changed. So that could have possible positive effects as well. If there is anything else, maybe it can be added on in terms of a follow-up video, but it was just about describing why and how it can come about and where from, and why, how, and when a form of treatment is needed toward them. An over-apologetic person may not be able to help themselves always, but unlike the receiving end of another individual out there that may watch this, someone that may know someone that is that way, you can apply certain steps and methods in a slow process. Some like these processes could be done on a more intensified level, or small little building blocks, depending on the individual you're dealing with and how they are or normally are. Okay? And it's about doing it in a natural way, so it's not too obvious, because if it's too obvious, it might blow the cover and it might make them question why are you doing it, and it might even lead to them, depending on how alert they are or how sensitive or in touch they are, they may pick up on it and reject the next time you say it's okay. They may think, I need to double down on it, so it definitely is my fault. You got to make sure you don't blow the cover and you keep it casual, small scale, standard, typical conversations as you normally would with a person. It's just that when they meet you in the middle and you join up, you don't accept their apology, you brush it off, but not in a disrespectful way, okay? Because if you just brush off in a disrespectful way, it could lead to them thinking or feeling that it's worse what they've done, possibly. You do it in a casual, calming voice or tone. And specifically, what would also help is, when you're familiar with another person or group, is that you use similar wording and language and responses as you normally would do, so they're familiar with it. It sounds natural coming from you. It's just what you do this time around is you just give a form of stability and reiterate that it's fine. They don't need to worry, when all the other times they would have worried because of them being on the receiving end and at the hands of another person. Hopefully this video is somewhat helpful. If you do have any questions or further stuff, you can leave it below. Just wanted to give you a few scenarios and examples along the way. My name is Warlight Ref. If you want to check out my previous video, how to help someone that may help themselves, I'll provide a link down below. But that's it for now. Goodbye for now.